In this episode, we are going to discuss the difference between a brand and a commodity. A brand is based on value, integrity, and loyalty. A commodity is based on price. One of those two businesses will create exponential amounts of wealth for you. We invite you to keep listening to learn which one is the better business. Welcome to the Red to Black podcast with your hosts Werner and Mario. We invite you to like and comment on this episode because that tells the YouTube algorithm to share this with the world. Something that I really love is the difference between like a wonderful brand and a commodity. Would you mind talking about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to get stuck in a business that buys a brand and sells a commodity. So really, right now, you could see this in the airlines. They buy a Boeing jet, they buy a Bombardier jet, they buy an Airbus jet, and they basically sell a commodity. They sell the square footage of seat that you're renting for, let's say, 5 hours in the sky. It's a miserable business to be operating. Some super talented CEOs are running those businesses, and they're doing as good a work as they can do to make a miserable business model profitable. And they get to the point where they have to charge you for baggage and little drinks and little trinkets to try to eke out a tiny profit, because they have these high fixed costs. They got those planes, they got the gas, and they've got really expensive crew members that need pensions and a lot of benefits, whether they're flying or not. Conversely, there's businesses that buy basically commodities. They basically buy things that are traded on a commodity, very low margin commodities that they purchase. They do some value add to the commodity, but then they put a brand on it. They have a wonderful brand in the consumer's mind or the end user's mind that relates a lot more value than the underlying commodity that is that product. So that's kind of the difference between a commodity business and a brand. And if you're going to steer to high returns on investor capital, you're going to want to be in the businesses that have some sort of durable brand. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's an excellent synopsis to go a little deeper to explain to our listeners what you're saying. When you're looking at a commodity business, you're looking at, say, for example, you earn $1. That commodity business is spending 95 cents on that dollar to run all that equipment and all that labor. It's a very intensive business, and they're retaining 5 cents. But a well-branded business like a database or an SaaS or software as a service business, that business, let's say, is taking in $1 and it's keeping 30 cents on the dollar. All things being equal with your time, for me, I'd rather put my money into a business that's generating 30 cents on the dollar versus 5 cents on the dollar. And concurrently, a lot of the businesses that are generating 30 cents on the dollar, they're phenomenal brands. I mean, there's something about a high profit margin business and their brand that come together. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for the folks listening, Warner and I are not interested in drilling oil wells or digging up shiny metal out of the earth. Those are like the definition of a commodity business is it doesn't really matter where you buy your oil from. It's a gallon. A gallon is a gallon of diesel. And the reality is we're all just scrambling in that business to try to undercut the competition with price. We're going to sell it. We're going to sell it just above what it takes us to get it out of the ground, because at the end of the day, people don't really care if they buy it across the street. There's no brand associated with what goes in your gas tank. It's really just at the end of the day. I mean, there's some secret magical spells that companies try to put on, specifically Chevron with Techron. There's some things that they're trying to get you to be loyal to a certain brand. But at the end of the day, you need a gallon of gas to get down the road, and it doesn't really matter where you buy it. So you might as well shop on price versus brand. Same with companies that are up in Alaska digging up shiny metal out of the ground. If you're going to buy an ounce of that stuff, it doesn't really matter who dug it out of the earth. You're just shopping based on price, not brand. Let's take a Yeti cooler. It just keeps stuff cold. It's a bunch of plastic that's molded, most likely overseas and shipped back. But there's some special thing with the Sportsman. They've really turned the Yeti cooler into the Rolex. Let's say it's a redneck Rolex. It's got a special brand in the consumer's mind that has to do with quality, and it has to do with an escapism where it's the weekend and you're finally got the boat in the water and you're going to push off and you're going to hold some ice and potentially put some fish in the box. You can buy any cooler, really. It's just plastic. It's plastic and some insulation. But there's something special about that brand Yeti, and they've really tapped into maybe some escapism that is connecting with the consumer. It's a wonderful business to watch. Just getting those kind of ideas out there is how you're going to find some wonderful private businesses. And if I can, I'd go back to 2 podcasts ago. On our first podcast, we talked about building sets and reps with the Value Line Investment Survey. That document, it's found in big public libraries. It's very expensive to obtain for a private investor, but it will train you to see patterns. Like Warner was saying, there are certain businesses that retain 30 cents on every dollar of revenue. Their operating margin is a 30% operating margin business. If you flip through every Value Line investment survey on 7,000 different companies or 7,500 different companies in that publication, you're going to train your eye to start seeing patterns of what constitute a great business, and it can be applied into the private business world as well. Back to you, Warner.
2 nuggets of gold there that I'm hearing, which you said, which is we're really talking about two different things here. It's brand and it's the underlying business model. So $1 of revenue, 30 cents that you retain, and then the brand, which is really the value of the business. It's really how the business communicates what it's all about, who it really is, the personality behind that business, and it's communicating that to the customer. And the customer, they do that over the long term. They create this trust. Those two things together create the makings of a phenomenal business. And it's rare that you find individuals that understand both the brand and an underlying business model. You'll have marketing guys that just understand one, and you'll have business guys that understand the other part, which is the revenue, the business model. If you can understand both and you apply that to any business you buy, it will create insane amounts of wealth.
Yeah, Warner, so you said trust. The brand in the consumer's mind is really, it boils down to trust. If you distill it down, it's saying something about the story. The brand is telling the story. It's a quick synopsis of the story. Every business has a story. Some are good, some are really, really great, some are horrible stories, some are mediocre. A wonderful brand is a synopsis of the story of how that business started, how it grew from an adolescent business into a adult, full-grown business. And I want to give a definition of what I consider a wonderful business, or what I would encourage others to look at if they're going to say this is a wonderful business. I would say a wonderful business returns a high level of investor capital back to the investors every year, and it needs very little incremental capital to grow. And if it does need that incremental capital to grow, it's able to produce that within the business. It doesn't have to do a capital call to the investors to grow the business. It's basically drowning in free cash flow. And what it does, what it enables a business to do is grow the business internally. Use as much capital as you need to grow the business. You've generated that through your brand, through telling your story, through a wonderful product or service. And then with the cash left over, it can do one of two things that are really smart. It can pay its investors a dividend so that they can go out and buy other businesses, or it can do the same thing within the business. It can retain that invested capital. It can retain what it's grown and not pay it out as a dividend, but go out and do bolt-on acquisitions. Take other businesses that work in their business, fix them up, bolt them on, and grow and expand their business, add fuel to their business through the acquisition of other businesses. That's what I would define as a wonderful business. And I'll kind of leave it at that unless you have any thoughts, and we'll transition into how do you actually obtain a purchase agreement with a private owner.
I think those are phenomenal points. Just to recap real quickly, what you said is the brand is is a personality, and there's a story behind that personality that connects with the potential customer. And the goal behind any branding, marketing individual is to create an insane amount of value and connection through that story, where people unconsciously go say or choose, I'm buying that. I don't care if the price goes up, I'm buying that. Like a Tiffany's diamond, we've talked about that before. And then number two, it's a business that you can literally, like a database, you can literally just let it sit there, and as long as it's got electricity going to it, it just keeps running. But an oil field, and I know because we have an apartment building up in Wyoming, I've talked to guys in the field. It's an intensive business. It's extremely dangerous. It You have to be really, really careful because lives can it cost you lives that quickly. It's one of those businesses where you can't just take your thumb off the pulse. So there's the really insane great businesses like the database business. It just creates so many resources that you have choices, and I think that's what you're really saying. And now that we've sort of defined brand, wonderful operating margin business or valuable business. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We invite you to get to know us by clicking on our LinkedIn profiles in the description of this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification for future updates, and share this content with your networks. Thank you for your valuable time and insights. We greatly appreciate it.